Thank you for tuning into this episode of Back to the City. Today I am excited to be joined by BRIANNA KOCKA to talk about the new record DREAMLIFE, which came out at the beginning of the month. The concept of a dream life, I think, is really intriguing, and especially listening to the record, there are multiple references to sleeping and dreaming. It could mean two things. A dream life could be like my dream life, my fantasy life, but it could also be the life that only exists in dreams.
Yeah.
Are you consciously playing with the double meaning of dream life?
Yeah, I guess it's, I think I am. So I was struggling to come up with a title for the record, and then Matt Lateral, a friend of mine, listened through the tracks and suggested, I think Dream Life is the one. It's my favorite track, and it kind of makes sense. And all the songs were written while I was kind of living on this really dreamy island, out on Nantucket Island off the coast of Massachusetts. And I think everybody, you know, as we like watch life happen on social media, you see these beautiful, serene places and photos posted of this dreamy landscape. But while I was there, I was having such a horrible time. And so Dream Life is kind of this idea of it looks beautiful, but it's not really quite as it seems. So it's a little ironic. And even the cover of the album is a photo from Nantucket of these two sea turtles who like look very romantic on the beach in the sunset, and implies this kind of dreamy thing. Despite the whole record being pretty dark and depressing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
here is said image, this photograph, and it was taken by Peter Bregman, who was the chief engineer of the record too.
Yep.
What's the story behind this photograph being taken?
Yeah, I don't really remember how or why he took it or when he took it, but it just it struck me as the right image, so I just decided to use it, and he gave me permission to use it. So yeah, it's.
Was there a purposeful incongruity between the kind of the peacefulness of the image and the lightness of the image and the darkness on the other hand of the record?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and again, to get back to that idea of the double meaning of Dream Life, because that song on the record is very much about an actual dream, but it also kind of implies, again, that like that dreaminess of the record, how it's kind of has a lot of atmospheric qualities, but is definitely like ironic and dark and kind of incongruent with what's happening there.
Absolutely, because in that dream you were side by side with a person, and so simultaneously the way in which the song is composed, it seems to be saying you are there in this dream, but yet it is only in the dream life that this is happening.
Yeah, that song was it was about a former lover, and we had kind of been entrenched in each other's lives on and off since we were kids, really. It's somebody that I've known since I was like 12 years old, and
since you were one age children.
Yes, yeah, totally. And yeah, I woke up, I had this really beautiful and very intimate dream where we were just literally like laying in bed together, just enjoying each other, and not, you know, it wasn't anything like sexual, it was just like an intimate space. And then I woke up next to a partner that I was with at the time and was like, oh, this is confusing. This feels kind of weird and odd. So yeah, it's definitely, again, that kind of incongruent situation.
I think that Dream Life is the only song that doesn't involve a capo. Is that?
It is.
Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
And it's got nice, simple D, A minor, C, G. In some respects, in many respects, then the simplest in terms of song structure.
Yeah.
And it's got some of the least lyrics.
Yep.
So what's the relationship between it becoming the title track and its relative simplicity?
Yeah. So my friend Nicole Tuhaki, she sequenced the album for me, and she decided to put it at the end as kind of like a bookend to the entirety of the record, because it feels both like a melancholy song, but also could feel hopeful to some people as well.
In my dream life.
Exactly, you know?
Aspiring to the fantasy as being possible.
Totally, yeah. And so I guess in terms of the simplicity of it all, it's nice to kind of end on a very mellow, kind of like chill note. to keep it kind of down and keep it kind of simple, but the song itself is very dreamy with the pedal steel and that kind of stuff in there too.
Which
so,
is your father.
Yes, yeah, he played on most of the tracks, so it's pretty fun.
So it ends on this dreamy note. Midway through, track 4 is on a dreamy note, a lullaby, or it's called lullaby. There's a lot of double bass being played with a bow.
Yeah. So there's 2 different bassists that play on that track. Josh Gronowski, local, just amazing jazz bass player. I mean, he plays more than just jazz, but so he did the bowing bass, and then Adam Wozniak, who played at the record release show, played the pizzicato bass on it as well. So double trouble there.
Yeah. Beautiful double trouble.
Yeah.
It has one of my favorite lyrics on the record in it. As the sun is rising, you will have slept so tight. The way in which you're playing with tense there, it's the present tense, as the sun is rising. But it's being said to someone who's being sung a lullaby, so the sun will be rising. And you will have slept so tight. So it's just interesting, the mode of address to that person just then, saying, don't worry, things might not be calm now, but just look at this image and they will become so. Is that something that you're consciously doing with that lyric, and how does that relate to kind of the ethos of the record as a whole?
Yeah, I was definitely not conscious. It was just it's funny, I'm like, you probably thought more about the lyrics than I have in a lot of ways.
I've thought a lot about that particular lyric.
Yeah, no, it's probably one of my favorite tracks on the record as well. And it does have to do with sleeping and dreaming and finding a sense of calm. But yeah, I wrote that song as it's meant to be a lullaby to a child that I never have had or will have, probably. So it's got kind of like a bittersweet, again, like melancholy to it. But yeah, it's meant to be nurturing, because I've always wanted to be a nurturer and learn how to be a nurturer in that kind of matriarchal way. And so I guess that's where that comes from, and that's probably where those lyrics, kind of the playing with the tense, come from as well, where maybe this is a scary situation for a hypothetical child, or maybe it's not, and you will be calmed.
But the providing reassurance, like that's a role that is inhabited, that you inhabit that role, correct? Certainly throughout that song. And there's a nostalgia there too. Let me whistle that old tune. It'll scare the ghosts. There's different types of nostalgia, I think, throughout the record. There is this reaching back into the past to an old tune that will make things better in the present. And then in the song Wild Child, there's a more kind of raucous, like there's a nostalgia where one is not looking for calm in the past. Yeah. So Wild Child is track number 2. What contribution does that make? Certainly in terms of the sequencing. Is there a narrative to the record?
Yeah, I mean it's a loose narrative. Each of the songs are kind of standalone songs, and it was kind of hard. I had almost 20 to pick from for the record, and we whittled it down. We recorded 8, and then ended up only using 7 of them. But so it was hard to kind of pick and choose what means what and how do they relate to each other. But I think there is an overarching theme of nostalgia in the record, and that song in particular gets back to actually that same kind of melancholic relationship with the person that I wrote about in Dreamlife as well. So another part of our past together, but coming up in more of a, it's not that it's necessarily a positive light, but it is like that yearning and missing of a life that we used to kind of lead together. We were both musicians, and had a lot of bonfires and played a lot of music together, and just experienced the world in that way. And while isolated on an island, you kind of start missing things that maybe weren't actually that healthy. Like, I mean, one of the lyrics is, I've been missing the bottom of the bottle, because we just drank a lot of whiskey. And so, but so it's just, again, that interplay of nostalgia. But I wouldn't say there's necessarily like a super connection point between all the tracks.
Yeah. I'm missing the bottom of a bottle, and then a little bit later, I miss feeling bright and new. I miss the way you told me you were I and I was you. That's another favorite lyric of mine. The symmetry of the two phrases, just literally just switching the words you and I. Does so much to give a sense of the kind of achieved intimacy that's being missed. So it's interesting that it's called Wild Child as opposed to, say, Wild Children, or that the title of this song emphasizes you, what you were in relation to someone else, as opposed to having a title which is referring to the two.
Totally.
Is there a significance to that, do you think?
Yeah, I think when thinking through the lyrics of that song, it does feel pretty specific to my feelings of that situation.
Yeah.
It's hard to know how this individual really felt, or what types of memories or nostalgia he might have. So I was definitely trying hard to not put potential words in this person's mouth, and just really reflect on my own kind of longing and missing of this past life that we got to be kind of crazy and live together. So, yeah.
There's a celebration in the song of wildness, but then also of honesty, and the achievement of being honest about the nostalgia regarding the wildness. The recurring lyric is, if I'm being honest, I miss you too. Another very important person for the record, besides Matt helping determining what the title track would be, and Nicole helping with the sequencing, probably quite a bit more prominent, Holly Hansen was co-producer. And you highlight in the liner notes that the album would cease to exist without Holly Hansen. And then you kind of sign off that bit of the liner notes, peace and love and self-awareness. And self-awareness seems to be a crucial recurring thing too.
Yeah.
So the awareness, if I'm being honest, I miss you.
Yeah.
But then that seems to be countered by a different aspect of self-awareness. What's the significance of self-awareness, and why phrase peace and love and self-awareness?
Yeah, so that's just a huge theme in my life. I don't know if it's like because I'm a Sagittarius or what the deal is, but I am just like always on a journey of being aware of why I feel the way I feel, and how I am in the world, and just becoming emotionally aware, because I think it's easy to blame other people for the way that we feel, and I want to take hold of that in my own life. And so a lot of this writing is a way of coming to terms with who I am, and saying, oh, okay, this is me, but also that's maybe not healthy. Right. So maybe don't, drink a bottle of whiskey anymore. Not that I ever got crazy down the bottle, but
If I'm being honest, then this. If I'm being as healthy as possible. If I'm being as honest as possible, then this. If I'm being as healthy as possible, then this other thing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the peace and love and self-awareness bit is just, I've been learning a lot lately that happiness is a feeling just as much as sadness is a feeling. And for a lot of my life, I've tried to achieve happiness as like the be-all, end-all. And I've come to the conclusion that that's not really a way to be in the world. It's probably better to try and achieve some sense of equilibrium or peace. And understanding that happiness and sadness kind of come and go and ebb and flow. And I also just really believe in being an empathetic person and showing that love to other people. So I think those are like my top 3 ideals in life: peace and love and self-awareness.
They're pretty good as ideals go.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And so it seems like if these two things were mutually exclusive, and you had to commit to becoming the wild child again, or remaining the present, more self-aware self, then it seems... Definitely the latter. Definitely the latter. I've spent the past 10 or 15 years being the wild child, and it hasn't gotten me anywhere that has been helpful necessarily. I mean, I've made interesting art out of it, but at the end of the day, I would rather be healthy than be unhealthy and making art out of that. Sure. Yeah, you actually, on the topic of health, you took a few months off from working on the record, and the way in which you phrase that in a post about it was so that the team would be able to, kind of paraphrasing slightly, but kind of capture the intensity again, recover the intensity of the original, of the beginning of the tracking and the beginning of the mixing. So what was it like coming back to the record after those few months?
Yeah, wow, it was like really hard. It was so hard. Yeah, I mean, so I was really, so just to give you an understanding of the timeline, moved to Nantucket in July of 2015, was there until June of 2016, came back here and was just full force, like playing lots of shows, going on weekend tours, working a full-time job, in a partnership, had an animal that we were taking care of, bought a new house, just like, it was just a lot. I was just like going like 0 to 60, and that led right up to when we tracked the record in March of 2017, and we were only in the studio for 2.5 days, and it was such an intense experience. We were doing, 8-10 hours a day, trying to capture these songs live as a band without a click track, just feeling it in the room. And at the end of it, I was just like, holy crap, like I am exhausted, and I didn't realize how exhausted I was. And so I had definitely kept playing shows, but needed to back away from the record just to get fresh ears. The way that this record was tracked is different than any other record I've ever done. I've never live tracked anything, and I'm super perfectionistic when it comes to my vocals. And I was up until January when I mixed this with Tony at Minnehaha Recording Company, I wasn't even going to release it because I was so upset with my vocals and my performance. Yeah. So yeah, I just it's like, if it's just like 1 cent off, I'm like, that's flat. Nobody should be able to listen to that. So yeah, it was good to take that break and just get fresh ears and fresh perspective and come back to it, almost a year later and go, oh, this is better than I remember it. And I mean, the record almost didn't come out, honestly. Like my parents are the greatest financial contributors to it existing in the world, because I had run out of money and run out of steam and endurance, and they said, like, we want people to hear this, so we'll help you with that. And I was like, well, I guess now I have to re-engage with this thing that like felt really heavy and hard to get through.
Stoicism is something that strikes me as relevant too. There's lots of references to crying and to not crying. It's a really difficult situation for the protagonist in this song, and the recurring lyric is, but you don't cry. There's one chorus that ends with a chorus, and by that point you won't cry no more, but that's because the character is dead. They don't live anymore. It seems like the response of this character to this specific kind of terrible predicament is a very stoical response to not crying. But then the chorus, the one single chorus at the end, highlights that, of course, previously, crying and being less than stoical has been a part of this person's life, because you won't cry no more, they have cried before. How did this song develop, and how is it exploring stoicism and like emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how this song developed. I honestly don't have any recollection of when I started writing it, how I started writing it, so that's kind of interesting. But what I do remember is that I wanted to play with this idea of feminism, but kind of entrenched in this more anachronistic murder ballad type vibe, because at the time I had been listening to a lot of Gillian Welch, and she just kind of does that in her writing, her and David Rawlings, and so I was like, maybe I'll give that a try and see how that works. And so yeah, there's true pieces of me in that song, in that I have always felt I'm a highly emotional person, and I've always felt very conflicted about how to show that and when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate. A lot of people in my life have been uncomfortable with how I show my emotions, so I think that's probably where that whole you won't cry piece comes from. But yeah, I mean, lyrically, the journey is, this woman who is working and doesn't get paid the same as a man, and then goes home and has to take care of all of the home business on top of working a day job.
Yeah.
And
you get home and you cook, you clean, you put the baby down.
Yep. And then there's this partner who's just, not fully present and not really helping. And it kind of is meant to deal with this idea, we say now that women can have it all. And I think that's true, but I'm not sure we can have it all at the same time. And so, it's this character, this mother who's also working and not being paid an equal wage, and also having to deal with the home life, and has this heaviness of the emotionality of the situation. And, it comes to the place where she's like, I'm over it.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Over it, and then under the glass tide, meaning she drowns as well.
Yeah.
It's a suicide ballad, I suppose, really.
Yeah.
It's
a self-murder ballad.
Yeah.
So depressing. So depressing.
Are there other? Are you familiar with other songs of this nature? I'm not.
Murder ballads.
I mean, self-murder ballads.
I guess I don't know. So I guess the answer is no.
Yeah, I like how it. I love how it takes the conventions of the murder ballad and keeps the death component and the narrative component.
Kind of turns it on its head.
Turns it on its head.
Yeah. The joke with that song is, while we were in the studio, we're like, okay, we're gonna track this, and then this is gonna be on Westworld. We're gonna that's always been the ongoing joke. So we'll see if it ever gets a placement. But
I'm glad that there's a joke about it.
Yeah, I know, right? It needs it. It definitely needs it, for sure. Yeah.
And that's followed by Our Wait on the record, which is, I think, that's some good sequencing. Good job, Nicole.
The best job, honestly. She's so good at that.
My mind begins to stray is a lyric in Our Wait, and that's one of many lyrics in the record to do with the mind, what the mind is doing. In the opening track, War to Come, why didn't we just use our mind? Is the lyric. That's where stoicism first seemed to be a theme for me. There is this emotionality, but then there's this sense that, well, why don't we use our mind?
Yeah.
And that comes through in countering Wild Child with, oh, but I would rather be healthy. So what is the role of the mind throughout the record? The mind seems to be almost like a recurring character.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? I'm like, you're revealing things I haven't even thought about, and that's amazing. I think a lot of this gets back to my upbringing. Grew up very evangelical, and am now, on a good day, I'd say I'm an agnostic. On a bad day, I'd say I'm an atheist, depending on how open to the world I want to be.
Sure. I can empathize.
Yeah, and it's so there is always that balance in my life of how does logic fit, but also how does emotionality fit, and how do we keep that balance in everything that we do. So I'm sure that's probably a big part of the interplay of logic and the mind, and emphasis on that in the lyrics, but also trying to also go, it's okay to feel, and
absolutely.
You should feel. So
I think too often in our kind of Western culture, which is obviously a generalization, but in our culture there is this dichotomy, there's this dualism, mind-body dualism, and I think there's less of that in the record with the celebration of the emotions. Not to kind of shift into a philosophy debate.
That's what I studied in my undergrad. So
Spinoza is my favorite philosopher.
Yeah.
And for him, it's through understanding the emotions that one can become free. We're not free because we're affected by so many things. And so it seems almost Spinozan, why didn't we just use our mind? But the use that one puts the mind to isn't completely unrelated to the emotionality, I think.
Yeah, it's like compartmentalization is lovely, but maybe not always easily achieved.
Yeah.
So
or achievable, because we don't have this kind of faculty of free will to just think, okay, I'm going to stop feeling these emotions because they're not good for me.
Yeah, totally feel that. Yeah, and I can definitely get down with Spinoza, and I'm very anti-Descartes, so I'm right there with you.
Great. Yeah, and it shows in the music. So you studied philosophy, I just discovered. Are there ways in which your philosophy and your mode of thinking inform the type of songwriting that you do and the songs that you produce?
Yeah, I mean, critical thought in and of itself is the most important. I guess you could add that to my peace and love and self-awareness and critical thought, throw that on the end, because, I mean, I spent so much of my life not being told, don't engage in that, don't ask questions. Doubt,
faith.
Related to faith, doubt is not okay.
Right.
And I think that a lot of the way that I am in the world now is trying to promote that idea and embody it in some way. So I'm sure it's got to come through in some aspect. But I mean, there's definitely no like conscious. I'm not doing anything consciously to write in that way.
Yeah. It's interesting in terms of sequencing and in terms of what we're talking about now, that it begins with war to come. So even just with that title, it's, there's a suggestion that struggle is on the horizon. It kind of it's a fair warning to the listener that there will be some struggle and some darkness.
Yeah, I wrote that song during primaries, and it was definitely like based out of a political feeling about like what is going on out there in our realm in this country. So yeah, I feel that for sure.
It's interesting this kind of, so with the metaphor, the extended metaphor of war, like the rallying that is occurring, the mothers protect your sons, daughters lock up your doors. There's this emphasis on preparation. So there's a forward looking, the war is to come, but then there's a looking backwards, why didn't we use our eyes?
Yeah.
Why didn't we just use our mind? And that's interesting, the emphasis on mind and eyes. And so perception as well as like intellect. Yeah. Why didn't we perceive things as well as why didn't we think?
Yeah. And I mean, this song has always probably been the most elusive to me because it has a lot of, it's like it's not necessarily about one thing, and it's like, it was, written during primary season before the last election, but also a lot of the pieces, I mean, I think this was written when Trump was maybe even talking about like building a wall. And I was just like, okay, well, that sucks, in my opinion. And
build a wall to divide us, isn't there?
Yeah, and I mean, it also gets back to the ideals of we've become so entrenched culturally. Everyone is in their camp, and we can't seem to talk to each other anymore. And that personal empathy of these types of conversations don't seem to happen when it comes to the politics anymore, because we're all just in our little bubbles, and we're sustaining those bubbles by hearing, people and news that keep like pressing toward your worldview. Yeah, that is like one of my biggest pet peeves. Is a lot of my friends get annoyed with me because I always play devil's advocate, but I firmly believe that like. There's always something to learn from somebody else, and there's always a reason why somebody feels the way they feel.
Absolutely.
And so if we just write everything off, if I know somebody who maybe voted a different way than me, if I just write them off, there's no way to have a conversation. There's no way to see change. So yeah, the dualism, it's a real thing, and it also really bothers me. And I wish societally like we could strive to find more balance, to hear each other, and I think that's really part of this song in a lot of ways.
In my day job, I teach argumentation is one of the main courses that I teach, and like we always emphasize that argument is not war. Like argumentation can be the communal process that through which we achieve consensus, as opposed to like having an argument.
Totally.
Where conflict is the defining feature.
Yeah, well, and it gives you a chance to just see the human in another person and not just see the idea. Because at the end of the day, I think I have this old professor who his slogan was, "People are not the problem, they are the point." And I really firmly believe that. And if we are just entrenched in our worldviews and not experiencing other people and understanding why they believe the way they believe and empathizing to some degree, doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but then at least you can kind of come to that place of consensus. And I think
even if it's only consensus about why we differ, that's considerably better than writing someone off as like completely illogical. Understanding the logic even if you don't agree.
I mean, and that's so important to me too, because I growing up, highly religious. I was, starkly believed in the Bible as a literal thing. And I'm like, if I can change, if I can expand my worldview and see and hear other new ideas, and that was only done alongside people who were patient enough to ask questions and push me very delicately. I'm like, if I can do that, then we all can do it.
Sure.
So like, we need to find that space societally.
It almost seems as if the mind and the focus on the mind can save us from the war. If the war is something where there's two sides, it's almost as if
can we sit down and talk about this?
Yes.
Yeah. That would be great.
and realize, it's a metaphor. We aren't, or we needn't be marching troops.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a balance of like protectionism, like, okay, this is happening, like, brace yourself. But also, like, can we talk about this?
Yeah.
That would be nice. So, yeah, that's my hope, I guess, for the world. We'll see if we get there. I trust we can figure it out. So.
Well, yeah, good. I'll choose to be optimistic too.
Sweet.
So there's one thing to talk about, and it is religion, because it's the song Temple. That's the one song that we haven't looked at yet.
Yeah.
And I did pray, is the opening lyric, I did pray for your ghost. So it's interesting, you've been talking about your religious upbringing in the past, and then we have this song Temple, which uses the metaphor of baptism, and then you are the temple, I am temple, and it's not even I am a temple, just I am temple. So what's going on with that song, focusing on any of those features or anything else about the song?
Yeah, so this was the first song that I wrote after, so my other previous band, Sun Gods to Gamma Rays, we decided we were done, moved to Nantucket.
You did, on your own?
I went with a partner,
But not with the band.
Not with the band.
I was at the final show, and it was a great show.
Oh yeah, it's funny because I was very sick at that show. I had this cough that just wouldn't let up, and it lasted for 2 months after I moved to Nantucket. But
I didn't notice at the show.
Well, that's good. I'm happy no one else remembers, because I remember walking away going, that was not my best performance. But yeah, fun show. So moved to Nantucket, and I didn't really start writing any of these songs until January, and I moved there in the summer. So I took a good long break, in my opinion at least, from touching an instrument, using my voice. And that's pretty normal for me. I tend to go in spurts. But this was the first song that I wrote, coming back to first time playing the acoustic guitar in like 5 years. Finally allowing myself to write a folk song, because I've always been very like, I don't want to be another like white girl with a guitar. But
singing about my emotions.
Yeah, it feels very cliche, but I mean, I've just kind of gone, and that's who I am, so that's okay.
Nice. Yes, self-awareness.
Yeah, but this was, this is a very literal song for me about my experience of losing my faith. Every lyric is not even necessarily metaphorical. Like that baptism of fire was actually a memory of when I was 13. In Pentecostal circles, you're welcome to do baptism by fire, which means you're welcoming the Holy Spirit into your life. It's not you're not literally being baptized by fire, but it's that picture of the Holy Spirit being a kind of a flame dove. is what you're supposed to conjure during that moment. So that's a very real memory in the midst of the lyrics. But
so
yeah,
you vividly picture that, and at the time, it seemed real.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was real in your experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed real. It was real at the time, and I
you
mean,
agnostically say.
I mean, at this point in time, I'm conflicted about all of those experiences because the emotion was real, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And I would never ever want to say that somebody isn't experiencing those things in a real way, because I know how important they can be for people, and just happens that I'm not there anymore. And
you were just expressing your faith in humanity a moment ago, so there's
some faith left. There's some faith left. Yeah, no, I mean, for me,
it's a challenge to have faith in humanity at the moment.
Yeah, no, it is trying, to say the least. But yeah, I mean, that song is really, for a long time, I felt very just sad. I mean, losing my faith was one of the few hardest things I've been through in my life, because it was so foundational. And not until maybe like a year ago, and I started losing it in 2007, and it took about, I mean, it's been over 10 years, and it's taken about 10 years to finally go, okay, it's fully gone now. But it was just an incredibly painful process. And that song, Temple, it's mourning, because I wanted to be a temple for God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, but I can't abide it anymore.
But at the end of the song, you are. I am blooded and I am bruised. I am temple, crying out for you. Is that a different type of nostalgia, not for the wild child, but for the temple child? Or is that through self-awareness, maybe humanistic sense? Well, it seemed real to me, and there was a reality to it. It just it can't be explained through the theology.
Yeah, I think that lyric is, I mean, I spent a lot of time, I mean, still to this day, I'll start praying and be like, why am I doing this? I don't believe this. Why am I doing this? But there are those moments where I'm just like, I miss the comfort of the religion. And I want to be that temple still, and I want to be crying out for you to be a part of my life, you being God. And so it's again kind of that dichotomy of, this isn't real anymore, I'm mourning it, but I'm still sad. I mean, it feels like the worst breakup of your life.
Right.
And so
breaking up with God.
And that's just I have missed that more than I've missed a lover. Yeah. And it's one of those things of, I have people say, well, if you miss God that much, why don't you just become a Christian again? I'm like, well, if you miss an abusive partner, do you just go back? Like, just because you miss it doesn't mean you should live there.
Yeah, anymore. Again, what's healthy? If the mind, the recurring character, the mind is telling you that it isn't real, then to choose to go back to it becomes less possible. So, what is the relationship between the loss of faith that is kind of mourned in temple and the cultivation of the very present and real faith and reason that we've been talking about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm like, I don't know if I'm prepared to answer that, honestly.
You didn't think it was going to be a
No, I love it. It's great. I live for this. If I could do this all day, every day, I'd be a happy camper. But, I mean, I believe in reason, but I'm not fully on board. I mean, there's definitely moments where I'm like, what is the nature of a reality, really? I guess I'm uncomfortable, and this is the agnostic in me, I'm uncomfortable buying into any of it at this point. I mean, I believe in the material that is in this room. If we walk out of this room, I'm sure this table will still be here, but I don't know. I guess I'm at a point in my life where, I don't have a religious or theological faith, but but I view reason as a meta-narrative just as much as theology. I think as humans we want something to hold on to, and so that's why I am empathetic toward people who continue to go follow a religious path, or people who are so highly atheistic that science essentially becomes their religion. I'm sure all the atheists in the world are like, don't say that! But I really firmly believe that like meta-narratives are a real thing. It's how we make sense of the world.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm not sure what that means in terms of how I view reason. I think it's an incredible tool, but I certainly wouldn't say it's the be-all, end-all.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and again, I think it comes through in the lyrics. I really believe in experience and emotion, and that's maybe just part of my personality.
Just that kind of counters the why didn't we just use our mind? So again, looking back at you kind of at the posts that you were making as you were kind of working on the record, there was one time when you'd made a playlist for Holly's Tuesday early evenings at the 331. And you referred to that as a night of friendship and music, started by Holly and Nicole. Incontestably, I think, the people that we have these bonds with become like a congregation for us.
Quite literally, that's how tea feels on Tuesdays for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Another favorite philosopher of mine is Feuerbach, who believes that there's like an anthropological truth to Christianity, and the essence of Christianity. And so, when there's Christ, who is human, or
the embodiment.
Human. Yeah, exactly. So as these religious ideas develop, it's really a broadening, a celebration of different human attributes. And
I can feel that.
Yeah. So
totally.
And it seems like this is a night people should come to Tuesday early evenings.
100% agree.
Come and join the congregation.
Yeah.
The proselytizing.
Yeah. No, I mean, tea is like when Holly was starting that, it was, again, I remember her saying, I'm like, hope I don't misquote or speak on her behalf, but it was this idea that like, we want an excuse to be around our friends where we don't have to send a group text. So let's like get a night going where we get to like workshop really interesting music and have a playlist and like have some drinks or play some cards, and it's just a space where like if you go, you're gonna see somebody that you want to see.
Yeah, and not even at night, an early evening.
Yeah.
So
it's not past 9 p.m. because we all gotta go to bed.
You don't have to be a wild child. You can be healthy.
Yeah. No, I mean, and there was a portion of time too where I wasn't drinking. I was just taking a break, and I would still go to tea. And Jarrett, one of the owners the owner of 331, hands me a bubbly water, and it's like, it's all the same to him. It's about that communal space, and it is, I think, just an incredibly vital part of being humans together in the world.
I love that. So in the record, we began by talking about the double meaning of dream life. It's like a fantasy and like an ideal life, but then also something that exists only in dream. And then in the song Dream Life, there's this absent partner, and in the record, as well as the absent partner, there's the absent God that one's broken up with. But then I feel like, as well as the dream life, there is your real life, and the real life, like one senses. Which one's that cat?
Fine by me.
Real life is
walking in the door. I'll take it.
That's a nice note to end on. Here we are, experiencing real life, as are you, and we will see you at the 331 Club, I suspect.
Totally.
Some early Tuesday evening.
I'm almost there every week, so that's where you can come find me.
I've been there once, and it was last Tuesday, and maybe even the cat will come.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Yeah, this has been Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder. Thank you very much, Brianna.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You're welcome.